The Chicago Bulls get the rare positive written word for them in an article by John Hollinger. We'll talk a little bit about that. And the thing that he called out as a positive for the Chicago Bulls that a lot of Bulls fans are still doubting themselves. We'll talk a little bit about that. We're also going to talk about why Noa Essengue was one of the perfect draft picks for the Chicago Bulls team, considering the space that they're going into. And we're going to look at some other things. All that plus more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go and get into this content today, y'all. And it is rare that the Chicago Bulls get some positive words towards them. There's a lot of doubt around this team. We just recently talked yesterday about the article that ranked the Bulls 28th in the future power rankings, which was a little bit weird considering the strength of the Bulls draft picks, the strength of, the Chicago Bulls financial situation, even the youth that they have on this roster. And of course, a lot of it comes down to management. A lot of it comes down to that doubt around the Chicago Bulls. But one of the biggest things for the Bulls this offseason was the Josh Giddey contract saga, right? Which ended up being with them meeting right in the middle on a fully guaranteed deal for 4 years. That seems like the most sensible contract between where both sides were. And John Hollinger shared his take in regards to that, and he called it one of the most underrated moves of 2025 that the Bulls ranked on that list. He called it a long-term win for the Chicago Bulls and claims that anybody that people who say that Josh Giddey can't grow as a player basically called it dead wrong, saying this. The correct end game was securing his name on a long-term deal at a reasonable rate and hopefully generating massive surplus value in his age 25 and 26 seasons. The Bulls seem to have done just that. $25 million a year seems like a lot, but this deal doesn't require Josh Giddey to be a superstar, even close to one. It's an average of 14% of the projected salary cap. Thus, he tops out as something like a sixth man on a good team or a decent team's third best player. This contract is still a win. Giddey's deal would make him the sixth highest paid player on the 2026-27 Cleveland Cavaliers and the fifth highest paid player on this year's Miami Heat, Toronto Raptors, New York Knicks, or Minnesota Timberwolves. When you put the deal in that type of framework, the fact that, while people are looking at it, that he'd be the fifth highest paid player on the Cavs, the sixth highest paid player on the Cavs and the fifth highest paid player on teams like the Heat, the Raptors, the New York Knicks, and Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, the Knicks, Minnesota Timberwolves are above the Chicago Bulls. The Miami Heat, I think, are right there at that same level, and the Toronto Raptors are below the Chicago Bulls as things stand right now. They are hoping that Scotty Barnes is going to continue to make steps and make a big step in his career and in his development. But I think what it all leads to is that the way that Bulls fans have talked about this deal, like, oh my God, it's so much money. It's really not. And especially when you look at how the Chicago Bulls are hoping that a player like Modest or somebody who's not necessarily on the roster yet really ascends to be a star level player. Now, the hopes of that we could talk about it at a different date, right? But if that's your plan and that's where your focus really is, that deal's not too bad. Like people have talked about the Josh Giddey deal like it's something that is going to completely strap the Chicago Bulls to make moves, or they're worried about that, or even the people are like, oh, well, I look at this move and say, is it tradable? And it's like, I get where that's rooted in to a degree, but I think we got to look at this for what it's worth. Josh Giddey is 22 years old and a player that is already, when you look at his ability to rebound, his ability to facilitate, and his ability that he does have, no matter how awkward it looks at times, his ability to put up double-digit points, you're talking about a player that could average a triple-double. And I do think at some point in Josh Giddey's career, he's going to have a season where he averages a triple-double. And that type of production is more than worth 14% of the salary cap. 14% of the salary cap. And that's just it. Like, I get it that there's a lot of PTSD in this Bulls fan base, namely around the Zach LaVine deal and how when he got that, he quickly became unmovable in that. but that was more due to the size of that contract and the fact that the Bulls at the time were looking for some value back that just wasn't out there on the market, right? They were looking for ridiculous value back because highest paid player in Chicago Bulls history, right? That's not what this deal is. And hearing Hollinger, somebody like John Hollinger, talk about this deal and just put it into layman's terms are pretty straightforward that, hey, this deal doesn't even require him to become a superstar or even close to one, really. Now, if he doesn't that, then that's even more value. If Josh Giddey somehow ascends to a star in this league on this contract, it'll be one of the biggest value contracts that's in the NBA, period. If Giddey ascends to being somebody who's more 18, 9, and 9, close to that triple-double, and that's what he averages over a couple of years, easily one of the best value contracts in the NBA. And even if he doesn't ascend to that, as John Hollinger points it out, you just gotta be a really decent player on a solid enough team to get the value that's typically out of that level of contract. And Josh Giddey has a potential higher than that. You locked in a 22-year-old player that comes into the league with tons of years of experience that is still growing and refining his game because of the role that he had to play on other teams, which was not the same role that even best suits his skill set, but that he's going to get to play here in Chicago, and you lock that in. Now, well, Hollinger does also point out some other things in this one, and said this is one of the last quotes in this, said, nobody's denying that Giddey still has a lot to prove. There will immediately be more pressure on him this season after finishing 2024-25 the way he did and receiving a major pay raise. With that said, this isn't the same as Patrick Williams' disaster and shouldn't force anyone to lose sleep. If anything is keeping you up at night, let it be thinking about where the Bulls go from here. Giddey is just one piece of the puzzle, and now it's up to the front office to find the right pieces to fit around him. Now that's crazy. And that's where, again, one of the things that we will constantly see when the Bulls are talked about, even positively, is the doubt around the front office's ability to get shit done. And that's where some of this doubt comes in at, right? It's like, and I think that that's fair. I can understand the people that are like, okay, well, now can we bet on AK and Eversley? Giddey's now here. Can we bet on AK and Eversley to go out and find the guys around Josh Giddey to kind of overcome some of his weaknesses? And I give the front office a little credit when they do have a direction, they do move more intentionally. But the front office's history of not really understanding when to pivot, not understanding when to move off stuff, those type of things, it is something that reverberates through every time you talk about this team. And now with Josh Giddey, you need shooters, you need a rim protector, you need those type of things around this team. But the one thing that I always point out when that part of the conversation comes up is that not what most NBA teams are looking for nowadays anyway? Floor spacers, three-point shooters, defenders that can defend multiple positions, and of course, rim protection. And that's one of the biggest weak points, right? Josh Giddey's weakness defensively is not as bad as some people like to make it out to be. It's still a weakness nonetheless, and it is increased in being in a backcourt with Coby White because they have many of the same weaknesses in pick and roll defense. And, but I do think that some people overlook also that, like, I was in a conversation with somebody the other day, and they were like, well, Josh Giddey and Coby White give no effort defensively. I'm like, well, did you know that Josh Giddey is actually one of the best in the paint and mid-range defenders of guards in the league? He just is. Like, when you go look at the numbers and the field goal percentage that he gives up, Josh Giddey's biggest weakness is pick and roll defense. Coby White's biggest weakness is pick and roll defense as well. On ball, because of his arm, sometimes, he gets blown up there too, but Coby White's an active defender that is engaged, right? And he's been that for like the last 2 years now. Now, there's just sometimes where just his limitations just overcome him, and that just is what it is. And so having a backcourt of Coby White and Josh Giddey where neither one are plus defenders, it does make it a little bit more difficult. Now, we have seen teams in the past be able to overcome that. You look at the Cleveland Cavaliers, they have one of the worst defensive backcourts in the league, but they have such good up front and front line defense and rotational defense as well that, of course, it has not hurt them for being a positive defensive team. So now that's what it gets to, where AK and Eversley have to now find those defenders that make this a little bit better. You need a rim protector. You need better on-ball defenders, right? You need that one. And we'll see if the Bulls can get to that. We know acquiring Isaac Okoro is one of the reasons why they wanted him here, because they couldn't trust Lonzo to be on the court enough. You got Ayo coming back. We'll see what the role is for P. Will, right? We'll see what that ends up being. And I think one of the key things in this that they are, and that's where you look at the draft selection of Noa Essengue, we'll get into that more in a second, is that you could see where maybe the Bulls are starting to understand and look at things as well. Like, hey, we got to get defenders. Like, and not to say that that's Noah's only upside. Like I said, we're going to talk about Noah here in depth here in a second, right? But you need those guys. What Josh Giddey and how he created is going to be one of the best assets that he has here. And I think when you look at the efficiency that Vooch had last season, even when Vooch, Kobe, and Zach were on the court all together early in the season where Giddey wasn't necessarily scoring the best or the most efficiency, when you look at how his Josh Giddey's on-ball creation really helped find balance between those type of scores that we hadn't had before is really good, right? So, like, Giddey is a player that makes players better. He makes the players around him better. Now, the question is that can you find the right mix of guys that is going to help overcome some of his weaknesses and overcome his defensive limitations? And that's where the Bulls are going to have to draft and acquire with intention, and we'll see if the front office can do that, which leads us to the draft selection of Noa Essengue. Noa Essengue was one of the perfect type of draft picks for where this team is. I look at it like there were a couple of different players in this draft that I think really fit what the Chicago Bulls wanted, and one of those players, or what they needed, and one of those players was Noa Essengue, right? Noa Essengue with the fact that what he brings defensively, on-ball defense, the rim protection that he brings, the rebounding, these are all things that you look at and you say, all right, I see why. Now, of course, there's questions, and there are going to be questions on where and when is Noa Essengue going to get on the court? How good are they going to be able to develop him in his other skills? Because if he also is a player that ends up, developing his offense, which again, people talk so much. I talk so much about his defense, but do not overlook the fact that he does have some offensive upside as well. He's not the explosive athlete that like Amadis Buzelis is, but with his 9'2" standing reach, his 7'1" wingspan, and what he brings at being 6'10", 6'11-ish, that paints this picture that Noa Essengue. Again, I don't know if he's going to eventually be a 5, right? I was in conversations with Vaughn over in the Discord. We've had conversations. Me and Pat have had conversations over on Locked On Bulls. And if you eventually see Noah being a 5, it kind of even gets better, right, with what he does. If he ends up being a 4, it doesn't really hurt anything. Modest is going to have to play the 3. But there are only 2 players that really, well, not let me say only, but 2 players that really fit what the Bulls kind of needed defensively the most, as far as with athleticism and the ability to still have offensive upside. That was Noa Essengue, and that was another player from Franz, Juan Beringer, right? These were the 2 players that I think when you really look at it, like really fit that kind of mold where the Chicago Bulls are going the most. And I know Beringer had a really great summer league as far as rim protection and things like that, and it's already made some Bulls fans question, like, damn, did we get it right? Did we mess up on not getting Juan here? But it's going to be fine. And I think that, with drafting with intention, you do find the player that you need. And while Noa Essengue and his defensive upside is what a lot of people talk so much about, that potential that Noah has defensively, I said it before, like he has the way that Joakim Noah was able to switch on guards and stay with guards for a little while. Now, you never wanted him to go out there and just the plan is for him to be on guards one-on-one. But when he got switched on them, he was able to stay with them. He understood how to use his length and his strength to stay with guards for a couple of measures that gave the defense time to adjust. Noa Essengue could have that potential as well, right? And that when you have that from either your 4 or your 5 position, to where if you switch, because teams are going to try to hunt out those switches, and you get a player that can have that size but stay with the guard, that really does change quite a bit of things for you as far as how you build your team outright. And so I like the acquisition of Noa Essengue. It could be one that we end up loving with how he develops. That means trusting the Bulls development squad, which Wes Unseld Jr., Dan Craig. I have a lot more trust in what they've done because of who they have developed over the course of their NBA careers. And Jamal Murray, Bam Adebayo, Michael Porter Jr., Nikola Jokic, right? Tyler Hero. They've developed some players that you look at and you're like, hey, they've pulled some talent out of players and helped players, really get to a place, and in some of those cases, unique players as well. Like Bam is a very unique player in this league, right? So I think you're looking at that. Now, of course, that's best case scenario. The Bulls are going to have to prove that they can actually do that, and it's going to actually, for once, come to fruition for the Chicago Bulls. But there's signs of change here, and Noa Essengue is one of the perfect players to really kind of highlight that and what the Bulls are hoping they're going to get out of that. Now, how Noa ends up performing, how much he ends up playing, of course, that's at the feet of Billy Donovan. And if Billy has a similar plan like he had with Modest, even though I think that that plan may include Noa being in the G League a little bit more, unless he goes down there on his first assignment and you can clearly see. But when you looked at what Noah's done already playing against grown men, now European basketball is different than NBA basketball, no doubt. But I think that it shows that Noa also understands this by the fact that he didn't go play in EuroLeague this summer, right? He stayed here in Chicago working out with the Chicago Bulls training staff, working out at the Advocate Center, getting ready to go, right? And getting ready for the NBA. To me, that screams as a young man that understands, hey, I got to my dream of making it to the NBA. Now, can I go further past that and thrive in the NBA? And I think that's a man that realizes that he has to find that he has to be able to adapt to the physicality that is going to be here with the NBA. And so, and again, Arturas is once again doubling down on high upside, but I don't think it's the same just upside pick. Like Dalen Terry was full just hoping on upside, right? I don't think it's that same level of hoping on upside because I think there are more realized things that Noa Essengue is going to be able to bring to the NBA. Now, the level at which he's going to be able to do that is going to be interesting to watch, right? But you're clearly seeing that with some of the new acquisitions this year, that Arturas is focusing on defense, right? The swap for Lonzo Ball, Isaac Okoro, that was that, right? Getting Noa Essengue in the draft, a guy that has really high upside, physically gifted dude that's, that hybrid forward wing, whatever you want to say, that could eventually be a center, right? I think that's what it comes down to. And I think when you look at also Billy Donovan's coaching style, with the fact that he does want to use the team's conditioning as something to wear teams down, that is something that he's intentionally looking for this team this season. And I think that's it. I think Arturas is getting to a place of his vision getting clearer and clearer. And that's really what you need, right? It's good selling a franchise and a fan base on a vision, but you have to start bringing that vision into what it's going to be. And that's what it's going to, and that's what this, yesterday we talked about, the front office and how the trust isn't there at the front office, right? Like that was a big part of that article yesterday, is the lack of trust from the Chicago Bulls front office. It was there, right? And this front office does have ambition of really building something with a new modern style, going after it in the draft without tanking, those type of things. And you have to hit on stuff. Like I said it before, I said it over in Chicago Bears Central with Ryan Poles. I said that Ryan Poles, despite his over 30 draft picks that he's had, over a number of free agent acquisitions and trades that he's had, he hasn't hit a home run yet. He hasn't hit a home run. And I think the same thing can be said about Arturas here with the Chicago Bulls. You haven't hit a home run yet. I think eventually you have to hit a home run, meaning that either a free agent acquisition, a trade, or a draft selection that you make has to be looked at this deal that unequivocally is an amazing acquisition. Not just a good acquisition, an amazing acquisition. The closest thing to that was maybe DeMar, because what DeMar came in here and was able to be in what we needed as a secondary scorer, but we didn't have really the team level success that we were hoping for with that sustained over years. And that's probably the closest thing to that we've had. Io is a really, really good, but I look at Io like, because of the value we got out of a second round pick, that's like a really strong double, right? But you need to eventually hit a home run. That could be the Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey trade when we look back on it now that Josh Giddey's locked in. Maybe that's something we look back on. That could be the Manas Buzelis acquisition. That could be the Kobe or Io re-signings if those things happen. It could be the Noa Essengue draft pick. It could be one of those things. But as it stands right now, there's not been a home run hit by this front office yet. And you have to eventually do that. If you really want to ascend to a team that can be looked at as a contender, you have to hit a home run. And that's what's eluding, amongst other things too. I'm not saying that that's the only thing, but that is something that can make this vision be a little bit more trustable and be a little bit more of clear, is that you have to hit on that home run eventually. And that's what that's what the Bulls have missed so far. There's not a home run yet. There's some potentials. And if Josh Giddey gets to that place of being that player that we know that he has the potential of being, if Modest hits that development, if Noah hits that, if those things, then you start talking about multiple home runs. You're Sammy Sosa at that point, right? But we have to see it first, because this front office has run out of good faith, and they burnt that bridge. So there's no more just giving them the credit before we see it, right? And I think I can say that for most Bulls fans. Not every single Bulls fan views things the same way, but I think for most, that home run has to be evident. It has to be clear. And hopefully we get to that place for this team where that home run comes into place at some point in time, because if it does, hey, I think that this team could be really good. I'm somebody who I think this team is going to be competing for a 500 or above record this year. I think that that's a potential with this team this season. Combination of where the East is, combination of, how this team finished and how much of that's going to end up holding true into the next season. Those are all reasons. But we got to see it actually happen on the basketball court, because that's where things are won. They're not won on a podcast of me talking about the possibilities of things, right? So we'll see where that ends up shaking out. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following us at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text message and or voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.